Welcome to my channel. Welcome back. One of the things I noticed as we're growing, when we're younger, is I always loved working with my dad. That was one of the things that was so amazing. I had a twin sister, yes, but she was always with mom. She was always doing things, that girlies do and whatnot. And my mom spent a lot of time, most of the time with her, which was fine because I was spending most of my time with my father and always on time away from work. Dad would show me how to do things, which I later came be quite quite appreciative of in the past years. And a lot of that had to do with kind of like fixing things. You could call me Joe Fix It at this point. As I grew older, I was like, I think I know how to do that. I know how to fix that. Think I can figure that out. And everybody was like, how do you know all that? I said, well, when you work with your dad all the time fixing stuff, yeah, you probably get a hand on it. So it's not everything that other dads had taught their children or that especially the girls had had time with. The boys, oh yeah, yeah, but unfortunately, as the girls came, there's a 10-year gap between my two brothers and us. I don't remember a time the boys told me that dad actually had time for them. He took them to places, but he wasn't really a sports fanatic per se. But they did watch hockey just like we did every Saturday night. And as much as I was not, sorry, a hockey fan or sports fan, I would sit there and look like I really enjoyed it. And that pleased him. He was just glad. And this was when I was like 8 or 10, going on 12, 14. And then finally at 16, I got a job. And when I would come home after work, we had the best time. My dad would wait for me, and we were going to watch a late show together. This is the first time that, we could actually do something, but it was late at night. My sister had long gone. She went out to parties usually from the time she was 14 on. And she was in good hands because we lived in a great area outside the city and everybody was very respectable and nobody drank. Nobody did drugs back then. Okay, a few people in school, but otherwise nobody did drugs. That was the last thing you wanted to do. I mean, there was too much fun to be had without that. So I remember when I would come home, Dad would ask me, you gonna make pizza? I said, yeah. Now this is when pizzas came in a box just like Kraft now. I mean, Kraft does it. They did it a couple years ago. Anyway, I would get it ready and we would have pizza for the late show, which was awesome. It started at 12 o'clock and it was done by 2. So, and this was almost every Saturday night that I can remember growing up with him. And mom would sleep right through the movie, never heard us because we kept the sound down. But there came one night, it was so scary. I remember reaching and going, ah, to my dad. And it scared the crap out of him. And he was going, don't you ever do that again. That was my favorite memory. I was like, oh my God, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. But it climbed halfway up the back of the couch and scared the crap out of him. But we never together forgot that one. So after that, we continued on our happy terms of having movies late. And then university came, of course, and I stayed there to go to university, but we still, had a very close relationship, and we still had a lot of things that we could do together. And I remember he worked so hard over just before the Christmas rush that he bought a used Skidoo for both my sister and I. And she kind of liked it, but she wasn't really fussy about it. So Dad thought, prime. let's go skidooing. I was like, absolutely. So if he was home through the week, we would try to get time in. And that's when the snow was so high. The drifts, it looks like, I don't know what you could call it today, but not like we have now. The weather has changed so much, but the snow was so high. We would just, it would be wonderful to get out in the hills and ski. We did that a lot of our time as a hobby. And my brother, by that time, had been married with one child and he lived up the road. So he was excited that he could actually meet us on the back trails and join us for an afternoon of skiing on Saturday and Sunday. So we had a great time through the winter. Unfortunately, today I don't see much of that happening, other than some people have a couple friends or whatever, and they will um, stay at a chateau or chalet now and spend a weekend just amongst themselves. Likewise, my older brother had taught us to skate on the river in front of us. And again, that would take up a lot of time after school. All the kids that lived around us said, they dumped their stuff off at our place and said, okay, let's go skating after, we get home. And they all took the bus home because by that time we were a couple of kilometers away from the school. You could walk, but we just rode the bus home, quickly went up, got changed into our outfits, and beat it down the hill to get our skates on and go on the river. And we were there for about 2 hours before parents would come and get them. And those, again, were memories that, I can't ever let go of. We just had the best time always. Staying upright was not my favorite thing, but it was worth it in the end because I did spend a lot of years skating as well. Those things don't seem to happen much. Now I do walk on a upper pad at one of our facilities here, and I do see some moms with their little ones and dads, and it brings back memories. And I love to watch the 2 and 3 year olds, and I know what a quality time that mom and dad is having with their children. And I was like, if only more parents could do this, it would be exciting. It's memories, and um, by the way that they came and left at the Qplex, we'll call it, um, I wondered if most of them weren't shift workers, because that's when you actually got your time in with your children. If you were a shift worker, you get 4 or 5 days off, not like a Monday to Friday job where you either work, days or evenings. Um, which a lot of times, if you're traveling, especially if you're in bigger cities, like I did find that there they had to travel hours to get home, hours to work and to from. Um, there was no facilities locally usually around these big cities, so people had to drive. So they really didn't have much going on except for the few basketball nets that opened up in the spring and summer. So I often wondered what children began to do, and I did find out later. A lot of them started putting time into computers and game controllers. Still not into cell phones really, even though the cell phones became available. Um, I know when I first got one, I never even bothered to use it. Actually, I still don't today, other than for pictures, because this is a way to have a cheap camera in your pocket if you need one. But for me, it's not, I don't bother to answer my cell phone unless I know it's emergency and I know who would be calling. But for the most part, it's one of those things where you just don't bother with. So back then, yes, we had a lot of weekends where we spent with a lot of family, a lot of friends, because mostly after school, that was your buddy time that you spent with maybe up to 10 or 12 kids in your backyard, in your downstairs basement playing something, and for us it was either Monopoly cards or whatever. But we grew strong friendships and good friendships at that. Today, most kids are out walking the mall or getting into trouble. So there's two varieties of that. Why do we have that now when we didn't have it before? And that comes to a very strong phrase I like to look at, dealing with people especially, that mom and dad, well, we all did. You know, as I grew older, I had my children at home. The eldest was 16 at the time. My son, the daughter, was 14, and he was to be keeping an eye on her. They went to a school, yada yada. You know, they came home after school, which was usually 5:30. Supper was prepared. I'd be home by 8 o'clock. Their dad was home by 5:30, but he never really was the old-fashioned dad for sure. He would sit and watch the news, but break up the odd fight amongst them. But really, he wasn't the same type of dad that I had for sure. And I wish my children had have had that kind of dad. They would understand. But luckily, my parents gave them what they could while they were alive. They always did something with them. So it was kind of nice to have my parents around to help them learn the things that I had. And they were silly games, whether it's X and O's or, go fish. Sometimes it was just playing in the snow at winter time. They would have mini shovels. They would help Grampy and Nanny, shovel things. Nanny would help them cook, things like that if I was working. So I always had somebody with them. But I think I might have used a babysitter for their upbringing, maybe totally in hours, maybe 40 hours for their whole lifespan of childhood. I didn't put any faith into that. I made sure that even if I worked a night shift, I would get ready, take them to school. My husband would leave. I would get them ready for school, get them fed, get their books and everything ready, take them, drive them down to school. I was also the lunch mom, so I had to get up at 11, beat it down to school, get everybody's lunches ready. And if I had to go out and get them, I would meet them wherever the restaurant was, pick up their stuff, bring it back, woof it off to the classrooms, and I would come back to bed for another 2 hours before my night shift. And then I would go and get the children. And so they never really knew anybody else other than, mom and dad and the grandparents and their uncle and their aunt. Like they knew the family very well because I tried to keep the tradition going as long as possible. And as far as parties, like we in the summer we had big barbecues. There was no doubt about that. I would be the one cooking for like 40 people. The odd person would bring by a bottle of pop or salad, but for the most part, I wanted to do this for them because I wanted them to relax, enjoy each other, and just reminisce. And we did this every summer. So at least 40 of our closest relatives, whether they were 3 miles away or 30, 3 hours away for a drive, or, you know, within an hour's drive, they would all come and it was like an exciting time. I did a Halloween one and I did a spring one as well. And that was all indoors, but the summer one was out on the decks. And I just loved them. Loved to watch everybody come and loved to watch all the cousins have a great time with their little ones, with my little ones. Like it was so much fun. The other thing I noticed is my house was the drop-off house, especially when I was off. On the weekends, my children would invite their buddies over for a sleepover. That meant probably 4 girls with my daughter, and that was maybe 7 or 8 boys with my son. We did have that rooms that each one could isolate their party into. And man, I'll tell you, there was no sleep those weekends. But I loved the kids I hung out with. We had the best time ever. Families knew where they were, and families were very happy to know they were coming. And at the end of that period, on usually Saturday night, was the parties, or sleepovers, I should say. The parents would come and get them by noon on Sunday. So all the kids remembered coming. And I just recently spoke to one of the boys, and he said, "Look at those memories are still with me." And he's 42 today. And so I just said, those are memories that I can't even outlive. Like, they're beautiful. They were so much fun watching everybody have a good time. Today, we don't have that. It's unfortunate to say. You're lucky if one child comes because they have nowhere to stay. It's not like families are home to look after those people. And the other thing I found was more and more children began to have kids in, but there wasn't an adult in the house. And to me, that's wrong. You can't watch over what's going on with your child if you're not home. And yes, I understand. I'm talking now about having to move into a two-family situation where both parents have to work. Now, we did too, but luckily, as a shift worker, it worked for me because I also had my mother and father to look after the kids if my husband traveled. Today, there doesn't seem to be that capacity. The male wants to be by himself. He just wants to watch TV. He wants somebody to look after him still. Those days are gone. No offense, guys. Those days are gone. And you're not putting in any work to the children. You're not helping them. And for the moms, it's like, I've done enough. I raised them. What age did you finish raising them? Because as far as I'm concerned, my kids were raised really strictly until they were 18. There were laws they needed to go by. They had a wild um, playtime, yes, and I took them everywhere I could, but it didn't really cost me anything but my time. But today, it's like, yeah, I see people working odd numbers. I have to work from 4 till 8. Well, that's kind of like when they're coming home and when they need supper and when they need to get their studies done. And I also know that a lot of schools now don't send homework with the kids like they used to because there's no one home. And I know most working families in today's society cannot afford to have a babysitter come. You do well, I guess, to look after the kids at the daycare. The money's not there. And boys, do I ever understand that. I mean, when I was by myself with my two children, raising them at various points, I understood that unless you have two people working, you can't do it all by yourself. You need help. And I understand that. But there's got to be a way around it because it's not going to get any better unless everybody does the same. And I hate to say that, but there comes a time when we have to figure out how do we get these children to live a better, a happier, drug-free life. And without the depression that they start carrying when they're 12, like really. Yeah. So I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully you like my channel and you will please subscribe and please leave me a comment what you think. And if you're going through any of this, please let me know. If you need a one-on-one, I'm also available. You can text me or you can leave me a message and I'll get back to you. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.